In the book of Esther, the key text that you find is in the book of Esther, chapter 4, verses 14 going down, which says, you cannot be silent at this hour. If you become silent, God will raise another person to come and fill up your position. Who knows? Maybe God has placed you in the palace for a time such as this. Now, for me, that concludes the entire program of our young people that we need to know as young people. We have been placed where we are placed for a time such as this. Occupy every opportunity. Occupy every space. Take up every assignment, knowing that where you are is where God has placed you. Not for yourself, but for his name's sake. You are relevant for a time such as this. The story of Esther begins off in a very shady way. I know many of us have looked at Esther and have looked at it as a hero. But verse 14 of this chapter will then remind us that she was not as strong at the beginning as she's being reminded now. The story begins off with a queen called Vashti and the king himself. The Bible does not spare us the detail. The king was drunk. He was having fun with his friends. Vashti, the queen, was a beauty pageant. Beautiful woman, the Bible tells us. In the midst of his intoxication and drunkenness, the king says, can Vashti come here and parade in front of my generals? Parade in front of my men and my friends. I want to show off the beauty of Vashti. Most likely, the attitude would have been that of undressing her slightly, making her look like a belly dancer, and demonstrate the physical beauty of Vashti to the consumption of the audience that was there. Vashti was going to be used as entertainment for the guest for the night. Oops. But Vashti, being Vashti, looks around herself with dignity of a queen to be looked and gorged upon by drunken men in the palace. She looks around and she says, I am not going to undress myself in front of a public audience. If the king wants to see my nakedness, he knows where we do it, not in public. She refused this public spectacle, and it costed her her queenship. I would want to submit to you that Vashti was an honorable woman. What Vashti refused to do, that what Esther agreed to do. So the passage actually takes off in a direction where the king is now looking for someone to replace Vashti. The king is looking for someone of a less quality and stubborn mentality than Vashti was. A king is looking for someone who is willing to show off more flesh than what the queen refused to do. So next time you're reading about Vashti, I suggest that you take off your hats. She was the respectable queen who refused to use and allow her body to be used for public entertainment. Esther walks into the scene, not as a hero. She walks into the scene to replace a moral degenerated king, to replace a queen who had higher values than her values. Worse still, Esther was a Jew. Vashti was a Mid-Persian. Now that breaks my heart. Here is a Jew brought up in the house of Judah. Here is a Jew brought up in the house of scholarship and learning and traditions of the scriptures and the word of God. And here is a pagan who did not even know God. But in her paganness, she was decent. She was respectable. She had honor. She had virtue. She had flesh to protect. And she refused to become a public spectacle, to be consumed by the visuals of the generals. Esther, God-fearing, was willing to show some flesh and become human, as it were. Have you never noticed that in the whole book of Esther, the name God is not mentioned at all? Some scholars have suggested it is because God had already departed from that environment. For you need to understand the book of Esther in the background of the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. That all the Jews had been asked, go back and rebuild your cities. But there are some Jews who had become influential in the city of the Medes and the Persians, who now had means. And going back to Jerusalem to relocate and rebuild became too expensive. So they decided they were going to settle there. But they forgot one thing. Even if you can settle in the Medo-Persian country, you are never a citizen of the Medes and the Persians. Sooner or later, grace ran out, and now they were being offered to be slaughtered. And in the midst of their mistakes and refusal to relocate, God steps in the story of Esther, and he intervenes them. I want to challenge young people out there. You've made wrong mistakes in your life. And sometimes it feels like the whole tribe has gone back home. The leaders have gone back home. The arks have gone back home. Priests and prophets have gone back home. Here you are, sitting in the palace, trapped in the midst of prosperity, trapped in a relationship, trapped with clothes and rings, and locked up in rooms where you've made commitments to become a wife, and you've become a pimp without you deciding for it. You've become a prostitute in someone's hand. You've become a vehicle of wickedness in someone's hands. In the midst of that corruption and decadence, the book of Esther says, who knows? Maybe you've been brought to this place for a time such as this. What time is such as this? Time for learning, time for development, time for reckoning, time for repositioning, time for refocusing. And if you fail to stand now, God is going to raise someone else. I want to pray and challenge every one of us out there, young people. Stand up and be counted. Does not matter where you are. God has placed you for a time such as this. God will come through for you. And those who have been looking and fixing up gallows to hang you will hang in their own gallows. May the Lord give you success and grant you prosperity. May he turn your evil and wrong choices and bless you with greater prosperity to protect your nation. Even this day, you are where you are for a time such as this.